Dad said I couldn't bring my kids on the New Year's trip because it was too expensive, but my brother's entire family was invited. I didn't say anything. I just went and took my kids to Dubai and posted the pictures. Dad called me furious. I'm 34 years old. I have 2 kids. Emma is 9 and Noah is 7. I've been a single mom for 5 years. Their father left when Noah was 2 and hasn't been in the picture since. I work as a project manager at a tech company. I make over $250,000 a year now, but no one in my family knows that. They still think I'm struggling because I don't talk about money with them. My brother Kevin is 38, married to Dana, and they have 3 kids. My parents have always favored Kevin for as long as I can remember. He got a car for his 16th birthday. I got a lecture on responsibility. They paid for his college. I had to take out student loans. They gave him $40,000 for the down payment on his house. I got a gift card when I bought my condo. I stopped expecting equal treatment years ago, but my kids didn't deserve the same treatment I got. In November, my dad called about a family trip for New Year's. He said he'd found a cabin in Aspen, a ski resort, hot tub, mountain views. He said Kevin, Dana, and their 3 kids were going. He said Mom was excited to have all the grandkids together. Then he paused. He said he couldn't include my kids this time. He said the cabin only had a certain number of rooms. He said it was already expensive with Kevin's family. I asked him how many rooms. 4 bedrooms, he said. I asked how many people. 7 in total. My 2 kids would fit perfectly. The problem wasn't space, it was money. I knew it the moment my father paused, that split second before he told me the cabin was already expensive with Kevin's family. That was it. I didn't need him to spell it out. 4 bedrooms, 7 people. Emma and Noah would fit perfectly by any honest person's math. But my father wasn't doing honest math. He was doing the usual math. I knew that math. I'd seen it work for 34 years with a consistency that would have been admirable if it weren't so painful. Kevin got the car at 16. I got a lecture. Kevin got a paid-for college degree. I took out loans that I finished paying off the same year Noah was born. Kevin got $40,000 for his house. I got a gift card when I bought my condo, with no one even asking how I'd managed the rest. The math had its own logic, a logic that didn't change no matter what I did. I didn't say any of that. It was what I always did. Not because I had nothing to say, but because I already knew how that conversation ended, with my father repeating that it's not that simple, with my mother calling the next day, asking me to be understanding, with Kevin hearing nothing about it. Because no one ever told Kevin there was a problem. Because for Kevin's family, there were never any problems. I said it was fine, that I understood that we'd see them soon. I hung up. I sat at the kitchen table with the phone face down in front of me. Emma was in her room doing homework. Noah was on the couch with his headphones on, completely oblivious to the call to the hot tub and the mountain views and the 3 cousins he wouldn't be seeing in Colorado. The TV was on in the background, playing something neither of them was watching. I looked at them and wondered what I would tell Emma when she asked why we didn't go. Because Emma would ask. Emma always asked. She was 9 with an accountant's memory. She remembered every promise, every number, every inconsistency. If I told her Grandpa said there wasn't enough space, she would remember that we'd seen pictures of that cabin on the resort's website, and that she herself had counted the beds out loud. 4 bedrooms, she'd said. How many of us are there? 2. And the cousins, 5 with Aunt Dana. So there's still 1 left, Mom. Emma was very good at counting. I picked up my phone not to call my father, but to look up flights. I hadn't planned it. It wasn't a decision I made sitting down with a list of pros and cons. It was more direct than that. If there was no room for my children on my family's trip, then my children and I would have our own trip. And it wasn't going to be a cabin in Aspen. Flights to Dubai left on December 28th. Return on January 3rd. 4 nights in a hotel overlooking the Persian Gulf. The price was exactly what I made in 4 days of work, which was something nobody in my family knew. Nobody knew about my salary. Nobody had ever asked. They still thought I was struggling, as if the 5 years since the kid's father left had frozen me in place. No one had noticed that wasn't the case. Or if they had, they hadn't said anything. I bought the tickets before Emma finished her homework. I didn't tell anyone in the family. Not because I wanted to set up some big reveal, but because there was no one to tell who would give me a real response. My mother would have told me to be careful with my money. My father wouldn't have understood. Kevin wouldn't have answered. I told Emma and Noah that night after dinner. They were both still in the kitchen, Noah with a half-peeled clementine and Emma with her tablet. I told them that in December we were going on a trip, and it wasn't going to be Colorado. Where, Noah asked. To Dubai, I said. He didn't know what Dubai was. Emma looked it up in 30 seconds and read aloud that it had the tallest building in the world. Then she looked up. Are we going to go up it? I told her we'd see. We were going to go up it. The weeks before the trip passed like December weeks do when you have 2 kids and a job that doesn't slow down for the holidays. Deadlines, lists. Noah asking every other day if there was snow in Dubai, and Emma reading everything we could possibly do on her tablet. She found the traditional souks, the mall aquarium, a revolving restaurant on the 123rd floor of a building, and asked if we could eat there. I told her we'd see. We were going to eat there. On December 28th, we took the red-eye flight. Noah fell asleep before the safety announcements were over. Emma lasted almost 3 hours with her headphones on before falling asleep with her head on my shoulder. I didn't sleep. I just watched the flight path on the screen in front of me, the little plane icon moving over the dark ocean, and I didn't think about anything in particular. I was just there, still my arm numb from Emma's weight, both kids sleeping beside me. And that silence that only exists at 3,000 feet when the whole world is asleep except you. We arrived in the morning. The taxi took us straight to the hotel, and when Emma saw the infinity pool from the car window, she turned to me with an expression that had no words. She just looked at me as if to verify it was real. It was real. The first 2 days were exactly that. The water, the January sun in the Gulf that warms you without burning. Noah discovering he liked dates more than anything he'd ever tasted. And Emma negotiating seriously 3 museums in exchange for a full day at the beach. With the schedule typed out on her tablet so there would be no misunderstandings. I answered work emails at night when they were asleep, because my team in Austin had a project due in January, and work didn't know about vacations. That didn't bother me either. It was the deal I'd made with myself 5 years ago when Noah turned 2 and his father left and I was alone with 2 kids and a job that barely paid the bills. Do it all in exchange for getting to decide how it gets done. That deal hadn't changed. It had just gotten better. On December 30th, I posted pictures. I didn't plan it as a gesture. It was what anyone on a trip does. Emma with her feet in the water. Noah with an ice cream cone in each hand because they offered him 2 flavors and he said he wanted to try them both at the same time. The towers reflected in the canal in the background in that late afternoon light that has a particular color in Dubai I'd never seen anywhere else. My phone started buzzing with notifications, friends, coworkers, a cousin I hadn't seen since Kevin's wedding. And then 40 minutes after I posted the first photo, a text from my father. Is that Dubai? Yes, I wrote. 3 minutes later, the call. I answered. It was a habit I hadn't completely broken. What are you doing there? It was the voice of someone who had already made up his mind before asking the question. On a trip with the kids. With what money? That question. Always that question with me. Never with Kevin. With my own dad. I don't understand how you can spend money on this when what? A short silence. When you said you couldn't afford Colorado. I never said I couldn't afford it. You told me there was no room. It's the same thing. No, it's not. Another longer silence. On his end, I could hear the sound of the TV in their living room, which was always on even if he wasn't watching. I heard that background noise and thought about how many conversations we'd had with that noise behind us. How many of them had ended with me giving up something I didn't want to just to make it stop. That's very irresponsible, Sandra. I looked at Emma lying on the bed with her tablet. I looked at Noah, who had piled all the hotel pillows into a single mound and burrowed underneath like he was building a fort. We're fine, Dad. The kids are fine. That's not the point. Happy New Year. And I hung up. I stood there with the phone in my hand. I waited for that familiar weight, that tightness in my chest that always came after any conversation with my father that didn't end the way he wanted. It didn't come. Noah poked his head out from under the pillows. Mom, tomorrow are we having breakfast at the restaurant on the 123rd floor? Yes, I said. The one that spins. That's the one. He smiled and disappeared back into his fort. Emma looked up from her tablet. The Burj Khalifa opens at 8:30 a.m., she said. If we go early, there's no line. Noted. I put the phone on the nightstand. I lay down on the bed next to Noah inside the pillow fort, and we just stayed like that for a while, the three of us in silence, while Emma kept reading facts about the tallest building in the world in a low voice like she was memorizing. Something important. My father could be furious. That was his decision, too. Mine was already made. On January 3rd, we landed at 6 a.m. Noah slept through the entire flight back, too. Emma stayed awake watching movies with her headphones on, and every time I looked at her, she gave me a small smile, as if we shared a secret that didn't need words. The taxi dropped us off in front of the condo at 8. The kids went up dragging their suitcases. I opened the door, turned on the lights, and stood for a moment in the doorway, looking at the apartment that had been ours for 5 years. 2 bedrooms, open kitchen. The living room window with a view of the park where Noah learned to ride his bike last summer. It wasn't big, but it was mine with every mortgage payment I had made alone from the beginning. Nobody in my family knew how much it had cost. When I bought it 3 years ago, I just didn't mention it, because nobody asked. My mother had called when she heard I was looking for something bigger and told me to be careful that mortgages were very complicated, that I shouldn't get into something I couldn't handle. I told her I had already run the numbers. I didn't say I'd had the down payment saved for a year because I had been saving with a clear purpose while they all still thought I was barely getting by. They gave me a gift card at the celebration dinner. I didn't say anything. I put the gift card in a drawer and never used it. It was still there between old bills and the washing machine manual. I let the kids get settled and made myself coffee. I sat at the same kitchen table where I had been in November when my father called to tell me there was no room for Emma and Noah in Aspen, and I opened my work email. 42 unread messages. It was a Saturday. The Austin project wouldn't wait until Monday. It was a data management system for a logistics company with a non-negotiable deadline. I was the project manager. I had 3 developers in different time zones, and a client who sent scope changes every 4 days as if they were free. If something went wrong with the delivery, it was my responsibility. It had been like that for 5 years. I joined the company when Noah was 2 and his father had just left. It wasn't a triumphant entry. I was a junior coordinator, the only one with kids, the only one who left exactly on time because I had to pick them up from daycare. For 6 months. I was the one who arrived on time and left on time, and nobody knew what to make of it. Then I delivered the first big project alone 3 days ahead of schedule and under budget. The second one, too. In my 3rd year, they offered me the first promotion. It involved traveling 2 weeks a month. I turned it down without a detailed explanation because that wasn't my boss's problem. 2 years later, another opportunity came up with sporadic travel. I took it. With that position came my current salary plus last year's bonuses. It was more than my parents had ever made together in any year of their working lives, probably. Stitch was something I hadn't mentioned because no one in my family had ever asked how I was doing. Not once in 5 years. I finished the emails at 1030. I went to check on the kids. Noah was still asleep, shoes still on. Emma was on her bedroom floor with the trip photos open on her tablet, swiping through them one by one, slowly like someone reviewing something they want to remember well. I sat down next to her. "Which one's your favorite?" I asked. She thought for a moment. Then she showed me one I didn't remember taking. Her and Noah in the spice market both looking up with the light filtering through the colorful fabric awnings. Noah's mouth was open in awe. Emma had a serious expression like someone committing a moment to memory. "This one," she said. "Why that one?" "Because Noah doesn't know you were taking the picture and he looks truly happy." I didn't say anything, just looked at her for a moment, and then at the photo again. Save. That afternoon, my mother called. The first time we'd spoken since before the trip. "Your father is very upset," she said, skipping any greeting. "I know. I don't understand why you did that." posting those photos knowing he would see them. It was a provocation. Mom, I went on a trip with my kids. I posted photos. That's what people do. You know what I mean. No. Explain it to me. Silence. Your father was embarrassed. His side of the family saw the pictures. They thought he'd given you the money for the trip. I stood still, processing that slowly. And that would be a problem. Why? Because Kevin knows your father doesn't have that kind of money available right now, and he asked why you got it. And he didn't. There it was. Not the trip, not the photos. Kevin, Mom, nobody gave me anything. I paid for my trip with my money, which is mine, which I earned. I know that, but how much do you think I make? She didn't answer right away. Your father says it can't be that much if you're still at the same company. It was the first time in 5 years anyone in my family had even brushed up against that question. Enough to take my kids to Dubai, I said, and enough to not need anyone to include me in their plans. I hung up before she could respond. I stood in the kitchen with the phone on the table. The coffee had gone cold. Through the window, the park was empty. January in our neighborhood was always like that, quiet, with the calm that comes after the year ends and before the next one really starts moving. I thought about what my mother had said. Kevin asking why his sister got something and he didn't. My father embarrassed not because he had excluded me, but because people might think he had paid for something he couldn't afford. That was the part that mattered most to them. Not that I had built something, but how it all looked from the outside. I threw out the cold coffee and made another. I had 42 emails, answered a project to deliver in 12 days, and 2 kids who were going back to school tomorrow and needed their backpacks checked tonight. The rest could wait. My mother called on a Wednesday at 7 p.m. to tell me my father wanted us to get together. She didn't use those exact words. She said Dad thinks it's important for the family to talk, that there were things to clear up, that Kevin and Dana would be there too. Saturday at noon at my parents' house, I asked what for. She said to resolve the trip situation. There's nothing to resolve, I said. The trip is over. There was a silence on the other end. Then Sandra, please. Your father is asking. I hung up without answering. I thought for a moment that I could just not go. I had enough reasons, but there was something I wanted to see. How my father would act when I walked in knowing what he didn't know I knew. I told my mother the next day that I would be there at 12 sharp. On Saturday, I dropped the kids off with a neighbor and arrived at exactly 12. I rang the bell. My mother opened the door with that expression she wore when she was trying to make everything seem normal. A slightly tense smile, quick, jerky movements. So glad you could come. For a visit that hadn't been optional. Kevin and Dana were already in the living room. Kevin was on the big couch with a beer in his hand, even though it was noon. Dana had her phone on her lap and looked up when I walked in. We said hello. Nothing warm, nothing hostile. The greeting of 2 people who tolerate each other in a family context and don't seek each other out otherwise. My father was standing by the window. He looked at me when I entered. I looked back at him. Sandra, Dad. I sat on the sofa. My mother brought coffee that no one had asked for and put it on the table. My father moved away from the window and took the armchair facing me. I wanted to talk about the trip, he said. What part of it? The photos. The way you handled the situation. I went on vacation with my kids and posted pictures. I'm not sure which part of that requires a family meeting. The problem, my father said, is that you created an uncomfortable situation for everyone. For everyone who specifically, for me, for your brother. He paused. People saw those photos and started asking questions. About money. About how you can afford a trip like that. I can afford it because I work 1 2-hour days most days. And have for the last 5 years. That's Kevin put his beer down on the table. Nobody's saying you don't work hard, he said, his voice, that of someone trying to sound reasonable. The point is, Dad had to explain to people that he didn't give you that money. It put him in a difficult position. Kevin, I didn't ask Dad to explain anything. That was his choice. But you created the situation. By going on vacation with my children, by posting photos of it on the same holiday weekend that Dad told me he couldn't include me on his trip, I looked at him. I waited a beat before answering. Do you know how many bedrooms that cabin had? He frowned. What's that got to do with anything? 4 bedrooms. There were 7 of you. Emma and Noah make 2 more. What exactly was the space problem? Kevin didn't answer. The problem wasn't space. I knew that from the first call. I don't expect equal treatment anymore. I haven't for years. But my kids don't have to grow up learning there's a different set of rules for them. My father cut in. Sandra, it's not that simple. How much did Kevin's college tuition cost? Silence. How much did you give them for the down payment on their house? My mother made a small move as if to speak but said nothing. I'm not asking for that money. I don't need it. What I am saying is that the math was never equal and I accepted it because you can't do anything about the past. But I am not going to sit here and explain why I took my own kids on vacation. The room fell silent. My father stared at me for several seconds, not with anger but with something harder to identify. Maybe the first time in a long time he didn't know how to respond. How much do you make now? He asked. It was the first time he'd ever asked me directly. I took a sip of the lukewarm coffee before answering. Enough, I said. That's not an answer. It's the only one you're getting today. Kevin leaned forward, his tone changed, no longer reasonable. Why the secret? What do you gain by hiding it? I'm not hiding it. I'm just not announcing it. They're different things. There shouldn't be secrets in a family. I looked at him. Kevin, how much do you make? He didn't answer. Exactly. I stood up. Thanks for the coffee, Mom. I have to go pick up the kids. My mother stood up too. Sandra, wait. Your father wanted. We've said what needed to be said. I looked directly at my father. The next time the family gets together to talk about my decisions, I'm going to need a better reason to come. I walked out. I closed the door carefully, without slamming it because there was nothing to prove with a slammed door. In the car, I sat for a moment with my hands on the wheel before starting it. I didn't feel what some people might expect to feel after a scene like that. It wasn't satisfaction. It was something more like exhaustion. The specific exhaustion of having to explain things that should never have needed explaining to people who have spent decades not understanding that their omissions count too. I started the car. I had to get my kids. That afternoon, Emma wanted to bake cookies. Noah had requested a family movie night in the living room. That was what was waiting for me. The rest of it was left behind in that room with the cold coffee and my father's silence, which was, in the end, the most eloquent thing he had said in a long time. Dana called on a Thursday afternoon. That had never happened before. Dana and I saw each other at family gatherings. We exchanged pleasantries. Occasionally. We'd comment on the kids, but nothing more. We did not have the kind of relationship where one of us called the other on a random Thursday. I answered because I saw her name and figured something had happened with the kids or my parents. Something concrete. Sandra. Her voice was different, lower than usual. Do you have a minute? Yeah. What's up? There was a long pause. I could hear background noise like she was outside somewhere. I need to ask you for something. And I need to ask you not to tell Kevin. I went still. What's going on, Dana? Another pause. Then Kevin lost his job. 6 weeks ago. I found out 3 weeks ago. I processed that. You've known for 3 weeks, and you haven't told his parents. I haven't told anyone. Kevin asked me not to. He's looking for something new, but... She trailed off. We're 2 months behind on the mortgage. The bank has called. And Kevin has a credit card debt I didn't know existed. I still said nothing. I know I have no right to ask you for anything. Dana continued, her voice steadier now, as if she'd rehearsed this, especially after what happened in January. But I don't know who else to call. Your parents can't help us financially, and I don't have anyone else. How much is the card debt? She hesitated. $18,000. And the mortgage arrears with late fees is almost $12,000. $30,000, approximately. I calculated it effortlessly, the kind of number I dealt with at work every day. Dana, does Kevin know you're calling me? No. Why are you calling me and not your own parents? A short silence. Because my parents know even less than yours do. And because you're the only one in this family who seems to have their head on straight, I wasn't sure if that was a compliment or just a description. What happened with Kevin's job? Another longer pause. He was laid off. There was a restructuring, she said, but the truth is he'd been having performance issues for months. His boss told me when I called to ask. Kevin never told me that part. I looked out my office window. It was 4 p.m., and the Austin team was online waiting for my feedback on the day's deliverable. Dana, I'm not going to give you that money. Silence. Not because I can't, I said, but because it wouldn't help. Not if Kevin doesn't know you're looking for help. And if the underlying problem is that he's been making decisions for months without telling you the truth, throwing money at the situation now doesn't solve anything. It just postpones the conversation you two need to have. I could hear her breathing, not crying, but the kind of silence that comes right before it. So what do I do? The first thing you do is let Kevin know that you know everything, that you called the bank, that you know about the card, that you know what his boss said. If I tell him that he's going to be furious, probably. Does that change what's happening? She didn't answer right away. Dana, you didn't call me for me to tell you everything is fine. You called me because you need someone to tell you what to do. And what I think you need to do is have that conversation with your husband before the bank starts making decisions for you. And if he won't talk, then you have to decide what you're going to do with that information. But that's a decision only you can make. Another silence. Are you going to say anything to your parents? She asked. No. This is between you two. I'm not going to manage your marriage's information. Thank you. Don't thank me. I didn't do anything. Yes, you did. You told me the truth. We hung up. I stared at my computer screen for a moment. I thought of Kevin on my parents' couch in January with his midday beer, telling me I had created an uncomfortable situation for the family. I thought of my father asking me how much I made, as if he had a right to know. I thought of the $40,000 they gave Kevin for his house, and the lecture on responsibility they gave me. I didn't feel satisfaction. It was just a fact, not revenge. Kevin had problems he had built himself, just as I had built what was mine. And neither thing had anything to do with the other. But I did think something I hadn't thought before. If my parents had distributed their help differently years ago, if they had given me the same as they gave him, I probably wouldn't have learned how to build things on my own. I would have learned to wait. I would have learned that someone else would solve my problems for me. The favoritism had damaged them both, just in different ways. I opened the email from the Austin team and got back to my day. That night, when the kids were in bed, I checked my accounts. Not because I had to, but because it was a habit I'd developed in the leanest years and had never abandoned, to know exactly where I stood. I was standing on solid ground. I had built it myself without anyone knowing, and it would remain mine no matter what happened in my parents' living room next Saturday. I closed the laptop and went to check that the kids were tucked in. Noah always kicked his blankets off in the middle of the night. Emma was always exactly as I'd left her. That's who they were, and I knew them because I was there every single day, without anyone having to tell me how. My father called on a Sunday morning. It was strange. My father didn't call on Sundays. He used Sundays to watch sports and have my mother bring him breakfast in the living room, a dynamic I had observed for 30 years without comment. I answered. Sandra. A pause. Can I come see you this week? Not I need to talk to you. Not we need to sort something out. He said, can I come see you, which was a phrase my father had never used with me in my entire adult life. It was always me who went to them when I asked. Wednesday. If you can. In the afternoon while the kids are at school. I told him yes. On Wednesday, he arrived on time. I buzzed him into my own condo, which was also a new thing. My father in my space on my terms, waiting for me to open the door. He came in. He looked around the apartment with the same careful expression people have when they enter a place for the first time and want to understand the person who lives there. He saw the kitchen table where Emma did her homework. He saw the photos from Dubai that I'd printed and framed by the window. He saw the bookshelf with Noah's books piled in no particular order. It's nice, he said. Thanks. I made him coffee. We sat at the table. He had his hands on the surface, one over the other, and didn't say anything for a few seconds. How are the kids? He finally asked. Good. Emma has a presentation at school next week. Noah's in a soccer league on Saturdays. He nodded. I'll come to the games. You've never asked. That quieted him. When was the last game, he asked. Last Saturday. He said nothing. He drank his coffee. Sandra, I came to tell you something. I'm listening. He took a breath. He was a 62-year-old man who had spent his life setting the tone of conversations. And right then, he looked like someone who didn't know how to start because he'd never practiced this part. What we did with the trip, it wasn't right. I looked at him. I waited. It wasn't a space problem. You were right. There was room. Pause. I didn't want to pay the extra, and instead of just telling you that I made up an excuse, I know, you knew at the time, yes. He nodded slowly. And you didn't say anything. No. Because I already knew the answer you would have given me if I had. That silenced him again. Kevin told me about his job, he said after a moment. He told you Dana convinced him. He paused. Your mother and I can't help them the way we'd like to. We have our retirement savings, but it's not enough to cover what they need, and we can't risk that. I didn't respond. Did you know about Kevin before I did? Dana called me. I didn't say anything because it wasn't my information to share. He looked at me. There was something in his expression I hadn't seen before. Not exactly shame. It was more like the recognition of something that had always been there, that he had chosen not to see. We've made mistakes with you, he said. With college, with the house, with the trip, with a lot of things. He took a long pause. I don't know if I can fix it all, but I wanted you to know that I know. I already know, Dad. Can you forgive me? I thought about it before I answered. Not because I didn't have an answer, but because I wanted it to be a real one, not a reflex. Yes, I said. But forgiveness doesn't change what happened. And it doesn't change how this works from now on. What do you mean? I mean my kids are not going to grow up feeling like they are less than Kevin's kids. If there are family gatherings, they are included equally. If there are trips, you ask if we want to go before assuming we can't. And if the answer is that there's no budget, you say that directly. No more excuses. My father nodded. Anything else, he asked? Yes. I want you to actually know your grandkids. Not just at Christmas dinner where everyone pretends everything's fine. Next Saturday is Noah's soccer game, 10 a.m. He looked at me. You want me to go, I want Noah to know his grandfather came to watch him play. Whether you want to go, that's different. I want to go. Then I'll see you there. He finished his coffee. He stood up. Before he left, he stopped by the Dubai photos on the windowsill. He looked at them for a moment. How was the trip? It was great. Emma and Noah loved it. Noah wants to go back. Emma has already researched the museums we missed. He smiled. It was a small, slightly awkward smile from someone who is just peeking into something they should have seen a long time ago. They're good kids. They're excellent kids. He left. I closed the door. I stood in the living room for a moment looking at the photos he had looked at. Emma and Noah in the spice market, both of them with their faces lifted to the light. The one Emma had chosen as her favorite, because Noah didn't know his picture was being taken, and he looked truly happy. That afternoon when the kids got home from school, I told them their grandfather was coming to the game on Saturday. Noah processed that for about 3 seconds. To mine, to yours. He went to his room without another word, but before closing the door, he turned back. And he's going to see when I score a goal. If you score a goal, yes, I'm going to score too. He closed the door. Emma looked at me from the table where she was organizing her things. So, how was the meeting with Grandpa? She asked. She was 9. And she already knew when an important conversation had taken place. Good, I said. I think things are going to get better. Are you sure? No, but I think so. Emma nodded with that seriousness of hers that sometimes made me forget she was a kid. Okay, she said and opened her notebook. On December 28th, exactly 1 year after the flight to Dubai, I was in my kitchen at 7 a.m. making breakfast. The new house still smelled of fresh paint in some corners. I'd bought it in October. 4 bedrooms, a backyard, a garage, 20 minutes from the kids' school. I'd had the down payment set aside for 2 years in an account no one knew existed, because that's how I operated without announcing anything until it was done. I had told Emma and Noah in September. Emma had walked through every room in silence and then came back to where I was standing. The one with the garden view is mine. Noah had gone straight to the garage to ask if 2 bikes would fit. They would. That morning, as the coffee brewed, I checked my phone. There was a message from my mother from the day before that I hadn't answered. Are you coming for dinner on the 31st? Kevin and Dana will be here. They're kids, too. I read it twice. A year ago, that question wouldn't have existed. The invitation would have been for Kevin and his family. And I would have found out later, or not at all, or they would have called to tell me that this time there was no room in a place I hadn't paid for. I replied, yes, we'll be there. We'll arrive at 7. Noah came downstairs at 8, dragging his feet, hair in every direction, eyes still half closed. He sat at the counter and put his head on his arms. How many days until New Year's? He asked without looking up. 3. He lifted his head. Are we going somewhere this year too, to Grandma and Grandpa's house? With the cousins, with the cousins. He nodded and rested his head on his arms again. For Noah, that was enough information for 8 a.m. Emma came down 20 minutes later, wide-awake, tablet in hand. I see you, answered Grandma. She sat across from me. Are you going to cook something to bring? I was thinking about it. Last year we brought nothing because we weren't invited. She said it without drama, like a fact. This year we were invited. I know. She put her tablet on the counter. Can I help cook? I told her yes. We spent the morning in the kitchen, the two of us. Emma followed instructions with a focus she rarely had for anything else. Noah appeared at 10 and sat watching with a clementine in his hand, offering unsolicited opinions on whether the batter looked right. On the 31st, we arrived at 7 sharp. My mother opened the door before we even knocked, which meant she'd been watching from the window. She hugged all 3 of us, the kids first, then me, and there was something different about that hug. Quieter, less rushed. Kevin and Dana were already inside with their 3 kids. Kevin looked at me when I entered. I looked back at him. We said hello. It wasn't exactly uncomfortable, but it wasn't simple either. It was the greeting of 2 people who have a pending conversation and have decided without saying so to leave it for another time. Dana squeezed my arm as I walked past her. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. The kids went out to my parents' backyard. Kevin's kids and Noah organized a game of something with no clear rules in about 4 minutes, with the volume that only 5 kids with enough space to run can produce. Emma stayed in the kitchen helping my mother, because Emma always preferred to have a concrete task at gatherings, rather than sit around waiting for something to happen. My father was in the living room. When I came in, he stood up, shook my hand first, then gave me a short, slightly clumsy hug of the kind men who haven't had much practice hugging give. I didn't comment on it. How's the new house? He asked when we sat down. Good. Noah finally has space for his things. Emma chose the room with the garden view. The garden one has a big window. Yes, it gets the morning sun. He nodded and filed that piece of information away without saying anything else. The night went on without incident. My mother had cooked too much, as always. The kids came back from the yard hungry and dusty. Kevin spoke little, but he spoke. At 1:05, Noah fell asleep on the couch with his head in my lap. Emma was at the table with her headphones on, completely oblivious to the noise in the room. My father sat down next to me. We watched Noah sleep for a moment without saying anything. He scored 3 goals in the last game, my father said. 4, but one was an own goal by the other team, so he only counts 3. My father smiled. He's honest. Very. Silence. This time last year you were in Dubai, he said. I was. It was the right decision. I thought for a moment, even though I already knew the answer. Yes, it was exactly the right decision. He nodded slowly. At 12, we all went out to the yard. Noah had woken up at 1:50, as if he had an internal alarm for such things and had demanded to go outside. Emma took off her headphones without anyone asking. Kevin's kids were running around the patio table. Noah had his eyes wide, looking at the sky. Emma was beside me, her shoulder pressed against mine. Quiet. My father was a few feet to my right. At one point, he looked at me. He didn't say anything. Neither did I. But it was the first time in a long time that we were in the same place without either of us having had to give something up for that to be possible. The year began with fireworks over the backyard, with Noah asking if we could stay longer, with Emma taking a picture of the 2 of them looking at the sky that I didn't know she had taken until days later. In that photo, Noah's mouth is open, He looks truly happy.